Guys, welcome to another video. Purple Political Talk here. And today we're going to be doing an analysis on the 2020 Senate elections, and we're going to use our JHK forecast to analyze this race and say where the Senate races stand as of today, July 30th, 2020. So first, we're going to take a look at our overall map with the chances of victory for either candidate. We're going to go through all the races, at least the important ones, and looking into them and seeing what are the chances for either candidate to win in any race. So generally speaking, nationwide, the chances for Democrats to gain control of the United States Senate currently is about 60%. And for the Republicans, it's about 40%. So, generally speaking, when it comes to chances, it's not a lot. I mean, it's pretty down the middle. Now, the Democrats do have a significantly higher chance, 20% chance. But what I've noticed with the JHK forecast is chances will never go up to the differences. So, by this chances, it could be a majority by one or two seats, and that might just be it. So we're going to go through and talk about each of the states and go through and analyze them. So we're going to start from the West Coast. I'm going to start some about these races. So Oregon is a state that shouldn't be a surprise. Pretty solidly Democratic. That's almost 100% certainty. Alaska, this state I think could have a little bit more possibility to go to the Democrat. In this case, Al Gross. He is very popular candidate. Dan Solomon will probably hold on anyways. So I guess here what we're talking about more is chances of victory than competitiveness. Because, a race could be competitive, but the other candidate is pretty much guaranteed to win. And that is the point of the forecast. So, in states like Arizona, this is a crucial state for the Republicans. They're probably going to lose, but if they can win Arizona, they could probably win in other places, which, really does help them. So Arizona, Mark Kelly has an 86.6% chance of winning, compared to Martha McSally's 13.4%. Ben Ray Lujan has actually a higher chance of victory than Dan Sullivan in Alaska, which I find very interesting considering that New Mexico stereotypically has become a more stereotypical swing state compared to Alaska. So New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan probably has that covered up. What about Colorado? So 83% to 20%. So this is a similar margin to the presidential election when we're looking at pretty much the election in general, but also the Rust Belt. So Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are around this margin, but in favor of the Democrats. John Hickenlooper is expected to win. That is no surprise. Cory Gardner is just so unpopular. This map clearly shows that. So, going through the races, I'm going to go through the races that are not as important. So, Idaho, GOP leading, Jim Risch. Paulette Jordan does have a chance, but it's a pretty solid race for the GOP. Wyoming, Cynthia Lummis. Again, that's another scenario where she is a Republican in a very solidly Republican state. The Democratic challenger is not as strong as Democratic challengers in other places. So therefore, we can say that Cynthia Lummis has a very strong chance at being elected. Montana, very important state. So we have Steve Daines going against Steve Bullock. So first of all, the polls are currently pretty tight. Some show Bullock ahead. Some show Steve Daines ahead. So the chances of victory are currently 0.3 to 34.7. So this shows that the race is actually somewhat more competitive. This is about the same, kind of the same margins that Texas is currently. So a flip might not be completely out of the books, but let's go in and actually dive into the state of Montana, because this is a very important state. So right now the chances of victory are 65.3 to 34.7, and here we see that a victory for Steve Bullock is definitely possible, because so I want you to take a look at this very important graph. So this is the projected vote. Generally speaking, so this would be a worst case scenario for Steve Daines. This would be a worst case scenario for Steve Bullock. And then this would be a best case scenario for Steve Bullock, and this would be the one for Steve Daines. So, the best case scenario of Steve Bullock is well into the median scenario for Steve Daines, which, makes the race super competitive. So, for those that like basketball, it's about a chance that a player makes a three, that Steve Bullock wins. So, this is kind of the projected vote in the state of Montana. The vote has narrowed down a little bit. The race has started to narrow down a lot. Steve Daines was leading by 70%. Now he's only leading by 64, almost 65. So it's not going to be as big of a thing. So when Montana, and then the vote share, it's getting a lot closer. So, I mean, when Steve Bullock first announced, Steve Daines still had a consistent lead. But now that we've gotten closer to Election Day, the race is narrowing down. So they could even project an average of a 4-point lead for Steve Daines at this point. But I think this race actually, I feel like the forecast is getting it a little wrong because I feel Steve Bullock does have the momentum. And from what I've heard of people that are living in the state of Montana, that's one of the biggest things I've heard. So I'm actually going to go back and do that same thing that I just did with Montana, with the state of Arizona. So Mark Kelly right now has a huge chance of victory. So 86.6% chance to a 13.4% chance for Martha McSally. So here we can see the different things. So well, we saw in Montana that the median for Steve Bullock was well into it was well into the median for Steve Daines. I mean, here it's different. I mean, the best case scenario for McSally, she's narrowly edging it out, and it would be super narrowly. Mark Kelly just has a very surmountable lead. Here it's the chance of Martha McSally winning, that a golf player makes a bogey. So that's interesting to watch. So, I mean, this race has never been good to Martha McSally. And if this race kind of looks like the presidential race a little bit, in my opinion. The Republican candidate has been sinking and sinking and sinking. And essentially, it's very interestingly around the same margin that we have the presidential race at this time. So, Martha McSally's chances at the Senate race are decreasing by the moment. And the vote share, again, super close maybe a couple months ago, maybe 3 points. Now it's looking more around maybe 7 points, which is a big loss for the Republican Party in the state of Arizona. So I'm going to go through the contested states and actually go through and talk about them. So South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, we're going to talk about this. So this race is very interesting because, first of all, we still don't know who the candidate will be. But we have a problem. I mean, the Republicans are currently with an issue that they have two candidates in the primary. So they have Roger Marshall, former U.S. House Representative, or he's actually an incumbent. He's just running. He retired. But he retired to run for Senate. But then you also have former Secretary of State, Chris Kobach, who's super unpopular. The Kansas RNC is trying by all means to get Chris Kobach out of the ticket. They don't want Chris Kobach to go run for Senate statewide. And the Democrats have a very strong candidate in Barbara Bollier. So this race is very uncertain because we have a chance of either the Republicans winning by a safe margin or the Democrats winning by at least a lean margin. So that's something to watch. I mean, Chris Kobach is the worst case scenario for the Republicans. We see, as we get closer to primary, and since Chris Kobach has been leading in the polls, Democratic chances are going up, and as well as their vote totals. So, interesting race. I mean, it's not very common, but it's going to be one of those things. Whoever wins the primary will be the decider factor of what happens in the state. I want to take a look at the state of Texas, because this is a race that a lot of people would say, maybe, it's like, I would say, like, almost a state where a lot of people have higher expectations for the Democrats than they probably should. So, this race is pretty much a lot of Democratic turnout. But the problem is that the Democratic candidate is not as strong to beat someone like John Cornyn. So, again, we're going to see our graph. The Democrats could narrowly pull it off in a best-case scenario. The current averages and chances is picking a random digit. So, any number from 0 to 9, I guess. Picking one of those at random. So, I mean, the Republicans have a very good chance at victory in that race. You see, this race was a lot closer, and actually it went down a little bit for the Democratic Party. It started to go up, and that's pretty much where it was maybe a month ago. And the vote share will be around similar where we expect it to be, around 12 points, which is pretty good for John Cornyn. And now we're going to go back to our nationwide map. So what are we going to look at? So Georgia. This race is an important race for the Republican Party. And this is the David Perdue versus Jon Ossoff regular Senate race. Jon Ossoff is well into the margin of error, I would guess, for this race. I mean, and looking at it, I think that David Perdue is just a weaker candidate than Jon Ossoff. That's a fact. But then Jon Ossoff is also running from behind. So this map shows 47.2% for Jon Ossoff projected vote, 51.7% for David Perdue. And honestly, it's looking pretty good for David Perdue, but he still should watch out. So this race was a lot closer at a point. I guess 67 to 33. Those were the same chances that Donald Trump won with in 2016 in like nationwide. Now they've dropped to 28% chance. So yeah, I mean, it's not looking so good for Jon Ossoff. The race is looking like it's going to be close, around 4% margin of victory, which is pretty good for a Democrat in the state of Georgia. And the chances of a Democratic victory here is 28%, which is about a chance that a blackjack dealer bust in blackjack. So that is a very interesting state. And we also have another Senate race here, but it's a little weird to analyze because we still do not know who the final nominee will be, because this is what you call a jungle primary. So what is a jungle primary? So a jungle primary is where all candidates run, but then only the top two stay. So generally speaking, when it comes to election day, if this is the fact where Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins are splitting the vote almost evenly and they're leaving these two Democrats behind, the Democrats do not have a chance at that seat. So right now, this is going to be the map. It looks a little weird, but so Loeffler, we saw that for a long time she was doing pretty bad. Doug Collins was the favorite, with Raphael Warnock and Lieberman kind of tying for who will be the Democratic candidate. And we saw that for a time, Lieberman was actually supposed to go to the runoff with Collins. But since then, I mean, Doug Collins has completely gone down, and Kelly Loeffler has now become the favorite, or she's getting close to at least, which is good because she's the current incumbent. She was appointed. So this race is a race to watch. It most likely will not be decided on election day. Nonetheless, by the time we get to election day, we're going to get a feel for the state. So we looked at that. South Carolina, I feel I just want to mention this race just because it's a little competitive. It's not going to be a race that's going to be a nail-biter. Nonetheless, I mean, Lindsey Graham's probably going to win here. He's like establishment Republican, which is literally what they like in South Carolina, which really does help him. Alabama is another state that, unfortunately, Doug Jones will not be able to hold on. He's actually somewhat approved, but, I mean, Republicans are Republicans in Alabama, but there's a very slim chance of Doug Jones pulling off an upset. And we see the difference of winning is a lot. I mean, it's a very low chance of victory. The race even might be in the safe margin if everything goes well for the Republicans. So that's going to be a race to watch. This race, I mean, it's one of the races that everyone has called already and said that this race will not go by that much. So there's two last races that I want to talk about in our specific map. So it's North Carolina with Cunningham and Tillis. So right now, I mean, Cunningham is pretty ahead. I mean, he has almost a 3-point lead according to this. So 64% chance of victory, 35.3% chance of losing. And the vote share, I mean, this race has gone up and down, up and down. So, I mean, for a time we had Tom Tillis going ahead for since March. Then Cunningham narrowly led for a couple days. Then he kept on growing. There was a couple, like another tied day, another tied period. And now just Cal Cunningham has gone away with his race. Honestly, Cal Cunningham is doing pretty well. He's fundraising a lot of stuff. So, I mean, this race, I really do agree with their projection and what they're saying. And at this point, it's looking like it's going to be a tight race percentage-wise. Nonetheless, I mean, with chances of victory, Cal Cunningham is almost guaranteed a victory. And the last state we're going to look at in this map will be the state of Maine, with Suzanne Collins going against Sarah Gideon. So right now, Sarah Gideon is the favorite to win with around 2.5% lead. So she has a 61.1% chance of victory compared to Suzanne Collins' 38.9%. So right now, I mean, Sarah Gideon has gone up completely in her chances. I mean, there was a time where she was doing pretty good. She was ahead of Collins in chances, which, look, in chances, 10 points is not a lot. And then she peaked down a little bit, and then she peaked at 64.4%, and then she went back down to 61%, and Collins is picking up again. And the vote share is supposed to be somewhat tight with almost a 2-point margin of victory. So Susan Collins, is it impossible for her? Not necessarily, but she will need to put in the work. So generally speaking, this is our map, and the Democrats have a very good chance of taking control of the Senate with 59.4%, compared to Republicans 40%. So take a look at this graph that explains the colors and what are the percent of chances of victory. And we look at all the races and analyze them. So now let's take a look at the uncertainty of the race. And so this is going to show us what are the most likely graphs and totals for the United States Senate as we go into these races. And I actually forgot to put the state of Kentucky, but Mitch McConnell's leading there, by the way, for that map. But I felt like I didn't have to put that one. So, I mean, because he was leading there by a lot. So, we're going to move on to this race. And so, getting a tied Senate is looking like a very big thing. So, either the Senate ties or the Democrats just gain one seat. Most likely outcomes. Then that's probably tied with the 51 to 49 majority for the Democrats. 49 to 51 majority for the Republicans is the next viable option. And then the Democrats have a lot higher chances of winning a lot more seats. But, I mean, the majority right now is looking like it's going to be either a tie or a slight win for either party or just one seat for the Democrats. I mean, and looking at the extreme scenario, so, I mean, the political parties, they really want to get to 60 seats. In Congress, 60 seats in the Senate is a magic number. There you have a filibuster-proof majority. It's good to have a lot more than 60 seats. Democrats have a chance to get there. Is it completely possible? Probably not. They only have 0.4 chance of happening. But it's still a possibility where Republicans have 0. So take a look at this graph, and we can tell a couple things. Democrats have a lot stronger numbers and percentages of getting higher seats. But when it comes to majority in general, I mean, Democrats do have a larger percentage, I think. Nonetheless, when it comes to closer majorities, Republicans do have a bigger number. So that's going to be something to look like. So we're going to look at this now. And this is what the chamber would look like in this graph. So if the projected races by the chances of victory and all of that go by what they're projecting them to go. So this would show the races by their projected vote margins. So I mean, races like Colorado plus 8.4, North Carolina plus 2.9, plus 2.6, Iowa plus 1.6, and Georgia plus 0.2. So, I mean, this is what's going to show. So, they expect to have a 50-50 tied Senate, but considering that a lot of people are expecting Joe Biden to win, Joe Biden's VP will fill in as a tiebreaker vote. And just looking over here, it's very easy. For example, a state like Montana and Kansas, those two states are easily trending Democratic with a lot of money spent on their side. And with possible unpopular candidates, especially in Kansas, those states could flip. So we could see anywhere from like a 52 majority to a 48 majority for their Democrats as a likely thing. And I think the best case scenario at this point for the Republicans might be around 52 or 53 seats. If they could narrowly carry out Arizona, is it very likely? No. But I mean, the most likely scenario at this point is 50-50 majority for the Democratic Party. And that's going to be interesting to see. So now, this graph shows the chances of winning the Senate as a party overall, I mean, over time. So, generally speaking, we had a somewhat larger amount of, so win Senate, this is the percentage of chances of winning the Senate. So, here we would have, there was a time, I guess, before the pandemic or early time of the pandemic where Republicans were ahead. Not by a lot, but by 1%. But then Democrats just started gaining like they did everywhere else. So, I mean, Democrats are very highly likely right now to take over the Senate with an average amount of seats of almost 50%. Democrats are nearing 51 seats, which is good for them. So, I mean, we can see a difference. This is the chances. This is the average seats. So, that's going to be a very interesting thing to see. And now we're going to look at our bell curves that will decide and show us what could decide the races. So, first of all, the percentage here shows how important is winning this race. So, if you win this race, how much do your chances increase? So, 33%, 31%, 10%. So, these are the race changers. And these races, whoever wins them has a higher chance of winning the Senate. So, North Carolina, we can see the Democratic curve is a lot further to the right, to the 100%, which is a big margin for the Democrats. Maine, similar thing. Iowa's a little behind for the Republican Party. The Republican Party loses Iowa, they should not have any hopes for the Senate. If they win, if the Democrats lose a state like North Carolina or Maine, it's going to look very hard for them to win. So these bell curves show whoever's on the right of the graph. So, for example, the Republicans in this case, the Democrats in this case, those are the people that are projected to win, and then on this side are the projected margins. So, just taking a look at this map, I mean, there's some curves where the other party winning looks very, very unlikely, while when you get to the closer states, you see how the graphs are currently pushing a lot more together. And this one's a weird graph just because of the runoff primary, so that's a jungle primary, so we won't know until election day. But generally speaking, what are our closest states by looking at it? North Carolina, Maine, Iowa's the closest state, definitely. Then Montana's pretty close, and other than that, everything else is quite close. I mean, their ends of the curves touch, but they're not on top. So purple means that it would be a very, very big key race changer, which really helps out with the competitiveness of the race. So this is our bell curves and shows the percentage of, or chances actually, of that race being super contested. So this is the last thing we're going to see for this video. So generally speaking, Democrats should be feeling great about the Senate. I mean, all of these things are showing that they have high chances of winning them. Is it going to be by a landslide? Who knows? Because there are so many things to change. By the time that we get to election day, or even just a couple days after the primary, so I know the Kansas primary is on next Tuesday, I think. So we're going to see what happens here, and we're going to be able to predict what happens here pretty soon. And then races like Montana and races like Iowa and North Carolina, it's going to be day by day until we get to election day. But as of right now, if everything stands as it is, Democrats have a 60% chance of winning, Republicans are only at 40%, really gives the advantage to the Democrats, and that really does help the Democrats. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch the development of these Senate races, and hopefully we get some of the most contested Senate races, because that would be very fun to analyze. So, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like and subscribe, and turn on post notifications to get notified when I post my next video. And if you like the channel, please share it with a friend or family, because we're really trying to grow, and I actually really appreciate all the growth we've been getting. I hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.